A top Space Force general warning the U.S. is lagging behind China and Russia in developing hypersonic defense technology. This as U.S. officials reportedly confirmed China's hypersonic missile test in July was more advanced than initially thought. Let's bring in Fox News senior strategic analyst General Jack Keane. And I noted that David Thompson, he's the vice chief of space operations for the United States, says we are not as advanced as the Chinese or the Russians in terms of hypersonic programs. Is that a problem, General?
Yeah, oh, it absolutely is, Dana. I mean, the United States is used to having a qualitative advantage over our adversaries for decades, and this has begun to change, not just with this system, but with some others. And clearly the Chinese and the Russians have technology that we do not have in terms of its deployability yet. The Army will produce a system, in 24, the Navy in 25 on surface ships, and also on submarines in 27. But that will still leave us with a major problem, Dana, because we don't have any way to defend against this system. And what we're involved in developing as quickly as we can is advanced satellites with sensors on it to be able to track this system as it orbits the Earth's atmosphere, and secondly, to be able to intercept it. So both of those developments have to take place, and they are a top priority, certainly for the Pentagon. And listen, we have said before that China has a quantitative advantage over us in the Indo-Pacific region. They've got more airplanes, they've got more ships, and they have more missiles than we have deployed in that area. And that is another thing that we have to overcome and begin to forward deploy our capability there to establish deterrence. After all, what we have learned from 40 years of dealing with the Soviet Union, we have to have a strategic deterrence that the enemy accepts as real and that we would use it, and therefore they do not want to enter into conflict with the United States. And we've got to fix this with a sense of urgency, Dana.
I feel the same on that one. I also wanted to ask you about this. You've followed this story for years, and the question of whether Russia is amassing troops on the borders with Ukraine for a possible invasion. And some are saying that maybe by late January that could happen. But the spokesperson for the Kremlin, our old friend Dmitry Peskov, says this hysteria is being whipped up artificially. He said this on state television in Russia. Those who have brought their armed forces from overseas are accusing us of unusual military activity on our own territory, that is, the United States. How do you see it, sir?
Well, first of all, we've got to see it as being real. I mean, there's over 90,000 troops that are in the vicinity of the Ukraine border. So that's obviously a serious situation. We don't know what's inside of Putin's head, whether he's going to conduct an invasion as the defense official in Ukraine thinks maybe by late January, or is he doing this just to make certain that the United States and the West stops providing assistance to Ukraine, and number two, Ukraine stops its desire to move towards the European Union and also to become a member of NATO. I think those latter two things, Russia has succeeded at, quite frankly, rather successfully in incurring Ukraine's ambitions and stopping those ambitions and also pushing back on the West. But this is a serious issue. It deserves monitoring. And certainly the United States should be sending unequivocal messages with NATO and our European friends as to what the cost will be for Russia if they take this on.
Right, because it doesn't seem clear. One last question, a quick one. President Biden will go to Fort Bragg today. It's always, of course, exciting when the commander-in-chief comes to visit. But this is coming as we get these reports that there are some Navy sailors that have had to take out loans after being shorted on pay. And then last week, we reported several times that 29% of troops faced food insecurity during the past year, meaning that they had a hard time paying bills in order to get food on the table. What should the commander-in-chief be thinking about that?
Yeah, well, I used to command Fort Bragg, so I'm delighted to see him heading down that way. There's some great troops down there like we have in other places. Listen, nobody in the military is making a lot of money, and they pretty much live from paycheck to paycheck with modest savings. So any event that comes that wasn't planned for will literally exhaust their savings, or they have to go get loans. And that is one of the things I saw on a regular basis as I spent my 37 years in the military. And some of the people that they may try to get loans for or financial deals aren't the best people to be making them, because they're involved in charging them with acceptance interest rates. But the thing here is what's going on. I mean, cost of living raises have been going on in the military. Is there a process problem here, which seems to be in the Navy, as to what's happening to it? And they got to resolve this. In my judgment, I used to, when I was close to the troops as a battalion commander, I had 800 under my command as opposed to thousands later on. I wanted to know every single soldier, every single month who had a pay complaint. And I would get my chain of command involved in that pay complaint. Because why? It's so serious, as I said. People live in paycheck to paycheck.
Right. And
unless you've been in that experience, you don't realize, how traumatic it is when you don't have that paycheck and you can't pay your bills and your credit ratings are beginning to be affected by it as well. This is something the leadership has got to get involved and get after it. There's nothing more that impacts soldier morale than not getting paid, obviously.
Yeah. Priority number one, indeed. General Keane, thank you so much.
No
Have
doubt.
a happy Thanksgiving if I don't see you before then.
Got to pay him. Thank you, General.